Okay, so today, what are we looking at? We're looking at forms. And I think that forms are the single most important tool in the Keela system. And I really think that if you're wanting to get the most out of your Keela account, it's really important that you have at least one form. And folks are often surprised by that. They say, "What? What about this? What about that?" But for me, it's always forms, and that's what we're going to be learning about today. Is how important those forms are, what they're going to be doing for you, and hopefully get you interested in them, and maybe get you interested in some forms that you might not have known about already. Story time. So if I was to ask you to envision a form, you might think of a blotchy piece of paper affixed to a clipboard. You're in a waiting room. And your pen, it seems to work fine when you're scribbling in the border of the form. But as soon as you go to complete a field in the form, it suddenly stops working. And everybody's surrounding you. There's heaps of people looking at you, thinking, why are they scribbling furiously on that form? Because this was before the pandemic in my hypothetical situation. And you should ask for a pen. You should go back to the receptionist and say, my pen isn't working. But to be honest, they're passive aggressive. They scare you a little bit. If this sounds familiar, this was my life previously. I hate filling out forms. I it gives me such an anxiety, and my pen never works. And if that sounds familiar, maybe then I'm not alone. But it's quite possible that I'm a rarity, that I'm the only person in this boat. But regardless, I want you to know that I've been feeling a lot happier lately because something really beautiful is happening in society at the moment. Forms are transitioning to online. And it's the best thing in the world. It's fantastic. People, no longer do I need to print out a form at home, fill it out, scan it, upload it, resend it. Forms are coming in the form of PDFs now that I can digitally sign, or I can fill out a form on my smartphone, or just with a couple of clicks from an email. It's beautiful. But what are forms? Maybe I'm getting a little carried away. Well, have you ever subscribed to someone's newsletter online? You put your email address in, maybe your full name, you tick a little box saying, yes, I would like to receive communications. Maybe you've entered your credit card details online to make a purchase or pay a bill, perhaps. That was a brilliant form, paying bills online. Or have you ever filled in one of those questionnaires, to book an appointment for a dentist or something, and it feels like it's never going to end, but then you get to the bottom and you book it? If you have, you filled out a form. All of these are examples of forms. And on my screen, you should see a picture of a form. I think it's the one we have for Keela to sign up for our newsletter, our online newsletter, David's weekly newsletter. We have a bunch of different forms. We've got subscription forms for newsletter signups, just like this, forms that accept payment processing, so donations, revenues, membership subscriptions, folks can pay through them, and custom forms, so stuff that can be forms that can be used for anything. Oh, let's take a look at some forms. Actually, I'd like to take you through some examples of good forms that I've seen from some of our existing users, so you get an idea of kind of the beauty of forms, and maybe you get a little bit more jazzed about them like I am. So I'm going to use 3 customers' websites as examples. If you see your website, be like, hey, that's me, give us a shout out. But I'm using some pretty beautiful forms, so maybe the folks that I'm using are form experts already, and they aren't even on this webinar. Maybe they don't need it. But definitely give us a shout out if you recognize your website. Let's start with the first one. We've got North York Community House. And I just want to point out one thing. This is one of the biggest reasons why I chose this. Look at this photo here. Everyone is smiling. Everyone looks so happy and jazzed to be there. I think it's amazing. I want to hang out with these people, right? I just thought it was such a beautiful photo. Everyone looks so open and happy. But back to what we're talking about. So I'm on this website and I've come here and I'm a donor. And straight away, you've got this beautiful picture inviting me in, makes me feel really connected to the organization, which is a brilliant thing to do. But the real shining star here is this donate button up here. And what it is it's called a call to action. We throw it around a lot in webinars. So forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but a call to action is a button that you can put on a website, in an email or an e-blast, or you can have it, sometimes it can be put in sort of text messages and things like that. Click here. And it's a really clear direction that your viewer sees and channels them towards an action. So calling them to take this action. And in this case, the action is donate. So this is a beautiful example of that best practice of having a call to action that's really clear, having it stand out, see how it pops out uh, beyond the rest of the call to actions that are on here. And it's at the top. So sometimes I see some donate buttons that are, hidden halfway down the page if I have to do all this scrolling. And then there might be this tiny little yellow PayPal donate button, and it's so small. And it's really not in line with the best practices. The best practice recommendations are have it big, have it clear, and if possible, have it at the top so no scrolling is required. So that's tip number one for folks playing at home. So here I am and I'm hoping to donate. I click on the donate button. I'm taken straight to a donation page within the website still. And here we have Keela's donation form. And you can see it's matched up with the colouring. So even though it's technically a Keela form embedded snugly right in the website, it still looks like it's a part of the website. And this brings me to best practice number 2. Wherever possible, try to embed your forms. So whenever you're collecting information or payments, embed them in your website. And that's because you want to keep folks on your website as long as you can, right? I sometimes see folks, if I click on a donate button, it sends me to another system. Maybe it sends me to Canada Helps or to PayPal directly or to GoFundMe. I sometimes see people getting sent to GoFundMe. And it's just not in line with the industry best practice, which is try to have everyone staying on your website as long as you can, because it helps to build that relationship. I'm here, I'm with North York Community House, and I'm here to stay. And the longer I'm there, the stronger my connection with them will be. So that's best practice number 2. So here I am, I've clicked once. I've gone to the website, I've clicked one button, the donate button, and I'm already here and I can start donating directly into this form, this Keela form that's on this website. And if I do make a donation, my contact profile will automatically be logged in North York Community House's Keela account. I'll receive a compliant receipt via email, and that payment will be processed and stored on my profile in Keela. So really beautiful use of embedded forms here working. So now that North York Community House have this donation form on their website, they can sit back. Everything that is along those lines is happening automatically. Gorgeous, I love it. You're going to see a lot of me gushing about beautiful websites. Prepare yourself. Let's move on to the next one. Single friendly church. I love the pops of color at the top here. It absolutely sucks me in. I'm drawn in completely. And with the beautiful blue background behind it, I think it's a real eye catcher, and it sort of draws my attention. So I really loved that. If you look up the top here, we have a different call to action. So it's not as specific as donate, and you'll see why in a moment. But again, I still know exactly what I need to click to get where I'm going. I'm wanting to sort of find out more about Single Friendly Church, which is the name of this org. Get involved. So I click there, and some really cool stuff to look at here. So here is a Keela subscription form. So what this does is it allows people to fill in their details and subscribe to Single Friendly Church's newsletter. But I wanted to point out their use of language here. I thought it was really wonderful. So instead of just the usual, sign up to receive email communication stuff, we've got join the campaign. And the word champion is used here, which I thought was really emotive language. And that's something we talk about in our email marketing webinars and best practices about trying to use personal, inclusive language like that to make people feel more connected. And I thought this was a really good example of it. So although it's not technically related to the forms, I wanted to point it out. Okay, so here's the subscription form to Keela. So folks, they're ticking a box here saying, yes, I want to physically opt in to receive emails. And just like with the donation form, anyone who completes this is going to have their profile added to Keela, their Keela account. They're going to have their email address added, and they're also going to be opted in. So it's a really cool way of making sure that you're being GDPR compliant, because we love those physical opt-ins. And it means that their subscription history is stored on their profile. So a really cool example of that. And it's automatic. It's a huge time saver. All of this is done in the background once it's on the website. Okay, last form. Oh, sorry, spoiler, this is where we're heading, but let me show you the website first. Look at this beautiful photo and these wonderful orange columns and the space that it creates at the top of the website. I might be getting a little arty in my analysis, but I thought this was just amazing. And the color scheme that LaunchSpace have chosen, LaunchSpace is the name of the org, of the orange, the blue, and the yellow is apparent throughout their account, throughout their website, which is really nice. That kind of color matching that creates a brand. Now, I wanted to show you this particular example because it's a little different to the ones we've looked at so far, and I wanted to show you the exception to my best practice rule. So let's go there. So here I'm at LaunchSpace, and let's say I want to sign up for a membership with them. So if I jump into memberships here, this is really cool. So firstly, I wanted to show you something that I think is just fantastic. You know how there was the orange columns at the start and on the page we just looked at? We've got that beautiful orange coming through here, but look what happens when I highlight text. How cool is that? I don't know how they did it, but I thought it was fantastic. But back to it. So here, previously we talked about how you should try and embed your forms in your website whenever you can as part of a best practice. But there is an exception to the rule, and LaunchSpace are a really great example of it. So we've got 3 different membership tiers that someone can sign up to when they head to LaunchSpace's website. We've got regular, senior, and student. And that's just honestly too much information to have on one form embedded in one website. They all have different discounts and different ages, different amounts and things like that. It would be too much to put into one. So what they've done, if I click on purchase regular membership, is they have a standalone Keela form which has all of their branding. So we've got this beautiful heading up here with all of the colors shining through that come from the website. And then they've used the standalone form to impart all this really rich information. So we've got an introduction that has a link to a PDF that can be downloaded, contact me, and then they've split their memberships up. So not only are their memberships split between regular, senior, and student, their memberships themselves are split into different payment options, which I've never seen before. I thought it was fantastic. Where, you're still having a regular membership, but you're paying for it monthly or quarterly or annually. And that would just be too much on an embedded form times 3. So I thought it was a really good case of a standalone form being necessary and really well worth it. But we're here to talk about forms themselves. So let's look at the elements of the form that LaunchSpace have used. So you've got all the usual stuff, collecting contact information, phone numbers and addresses, all of that stuff. When you're using forms, you can also collect social media handles, and it can be a little bit of extra work, but once you've got social media handles, you can reach out to people on Facebook directly and things like that. And I know it's really a really personal kind of experience, especially for younger kids who spend a lot of time on there anyway. You're definitely going to capture their attention if you speak to them on Facebook Messenger. But that's something that sometimes folks don't think of when they're creating forms. And of course, any information that's entered into these fields is going to be updated onto the new contact profile that's automatically added in Keela. So that's a cool thing. Down here, this is a really good one, but before I'm getting ahead of myself. So here we've got the subscribe me to your newsletter option. So here's the same question that was in the previous mailing list subscription form that we saw, but just a reminder, you can put that question in any of Keela's forms, and you definitely should. I think just throw out the net. The more people you have signing up, the more people you're going to be able to connect to. And then of course, there's a connection between a bigger contact list and more support. So there's an option there too. I also thought this was really cool though, the how did you hear about us question, and folks can select from any number of these options. And then later on, LaunchSpace can filter their contacts by that information or use it as a kind of evaluation of your marketing strategy. So you've got the opportunity, you've got people's attention, they're here. Use this as a time to collect as much data as you can, because it's all very useful. Okay, enough gushing of forms. Let's get back to the webinar. So, but before I do, I wanna talk to you all about your forms. So I've been watching a lot of webinars lately, and my favorite part, if I'm being honest, is the polls. So I haven't done a poll in a Care Labs webinar yet. I'm going to launch it now. So it should be appearing. Everyone should be able to see that. What kind of forms do you use on your website? So we've got sign up forms. I hope everyone uses a sign up form. Contact us, which is, a little form where you can put in your question or something like that. Volunteer sign up forms. Lots of folks have donation forms. I thought they might be the most common. Oh, a membership form. I hope I've inspired you with launch spaces. I'll just wait a couple more minutes. I never know how long to wait. I think that feels right. Okay. Oh, good. This is very promising. I was hoping lots of folks would have a sign up form, and it looks like we've got a few. Right, I'm going to end that poll, and I'm going to share results. So hopefully everyone can see those. This is my first time with a poll, so bear with me. All right, I might stop that because I've got one more question. Let me go one more poll. And I think I'm going to go here and launch poll. So of those forms, how many of your forms are Keela forms? All of them, some of them, none of them at the moment? That's a bit cheeky of me. Or I don't have any forms. I wanted to see if there are any folks who this is kind of their first time seeing a form in action. So it's looking like it's about even across the board, except everyone has a form so far. I don't have anyone saying I don't have any forms. Don't worry, I'm not going to call you out if you don't have any forms. Right, yeah, pretty even distribution actually. We've got all of them, some of them, and none of them at the moment. Okay. Whew. First time polling. I think that went well. All right, so interesting. We've got kind of a mix and a match, but most people are using forms. Everyone's using forms. Most people are using some Keela forms. Some people are using all of them, and a couple of folks here and there who aren't using any Keela forms. So my hope is that by the end of this, I can convince you all to use at least one Keela form. But if not, you might have learned something cool about websites. So when I say that everyone should be using at least one Keela form for their website, this is the form that I mean, the subscription forms. So maybe you're not a fundraising organization, maybe you don't collect donation payments, so you're not really applicable for a Keela donation form. Or maybe you don't have volunteers, so you're not going to use a custom form to create a volunteer sign up form. But I would hope that everybody using Keela has some form of email marketing going on. And if you do, my kind of the biggest idea that I have is that you should probably have Keela's subscription forms as the first step in your digital marketing strategy, if possible, if it's applicable to your org. Keela subscription forms, I've mentioned this, but they're GDPR compliant, they collect opt-ins, and they add stuff automatically. So can be a really fantastic way of automating processes in the background. I choose subscription forms for my example today because I think most people have some kind of newsletter happening or some kind of email communications happening. So it's just a good example so everyone can kind of benefit from it. But if we have any questions in the chat at the end about donation forms specifically or any other kind of any of our other forms, yeah, I can go through that as well. But let's stick with subscription forms for the moment. All right, let's jump into Keela. I'll show you what a subscription form does and we can look at some of the possibilities of it. So if I head to forms here, you find all your forms in here and go create form. Let's call it a newsletter sign up form. I can't spell today. Form type, I'm going to make it subscription, but we've got all these different types here. And that's what I mean by if you have questions about the other types, let me know. And I'll also include some details in the follow-up email about each of them. But we're sticking with subscription today. campaign and description are really handy items for really complicated forms or for forms that are accepting payments. But for a subscription form, I don't really bother with them. They're not really needed for such a simple form. The assignee, I'm going to keep it as myself because I'm going to be the team member who's responsible for maintaining this form. But the followers is where it gets really interesting. So because this form is connected to your Keela account, it means that you can receive Keela notifications whenever an action happens through it. So whoever I choose as a follower here will receive notifications when someone completes this form. So maybe I've got Anna and Nasheen who I want to receive a notification anytime someone signs up. So in this scenario, I would think about who needs to know. So maybe you've got an email communications coordinator or communications coordinator at your organization who sends a personalized welcome email anytime someone signs up. So they would be a good candidate to be receiving notifications in this case. Or maybe if it was a donation form, I would have my fundraising coordinator as a follower here, and they would receive those notifications every time someone fills in the form. They can go check the new profile that's been added and maybe trigger off something. If you have automation, Keela's automation tool, you can connect forms to those automation workflows as well and make all of those things begin happening automatically. But to be honest, the forms themselves have quite a lot of automation, which you'll see. I'll go ahead and I'll save it. I'm going to skip the overview tab. It doesn't really come into play until after you start receiving responses. And I want to talk about the pre-setup today. So I'm going to head straight to setup. Let's talk through it. So you've got the opportunity to have audience types on forms, which I find really handy because sometimes you've got forms that need to go straight to organizations. Sometimes they go to individuals only or a mix of both. I find that it depends on the form really. So because this is a newsletter sign up form, it's probably only going to be individuals if I'm being honest. But if it was a donation form, maybe I'd have it so that it was for individuals and organizations as well. Because sometimes folks do tend to make financial contributions on behalf of companies and organizations and things. But today we'll just do individuals and you do have that flexibility. Next, you've got the fields. So here you get to choose all of the pre-existing, regular contact information fields that appear on contacts profiles in your Keela account and choose which of them are going to be displayed on the form for folks to fill in and which of them are going to be required. So straight off the bat, you've got some pretty standard ones. First name, last name, and email address. And all three of these are required. We do need those to create contact profiles and because that's part of the keeping good data in your Keela account. But we also have subscribe me to your newsletter down here. And like I said, this can be turned on and off for every form that you have at Keela, not just the subscription form. So do make sure that if you have Keela forms published that you check this is on if you like. And you've got all these other bits and pieces you can choose from, like phone number and address, all the standard stuff. And I'm sure you all know about that. But what I really want to drive home is this bottom one here, form questions. So when it comes to Keela forms, the power is unlimited in terms of the information that you can collect. So you can have as many form questions as you like on a form. So they can be really good for registration forms, or if you think your data might be out of date, or if you just don't have that good data, if you don't have data that is that good, or clean or tidy, you can use these forms to collect new information and update contact profiles automatically. I think that's something I'd like to see the nonprofit industry doing a little bit more is feeling brave enough to collect information because information lets you learn more about your own organization. So give yourselves permission to do it. So let's add some questions. I want to show you kind of how it works. And this is the same process for all form types. I'm going to add a question here. Let's call it, I'll use Launchspace's idea. How did you hear about us? Now for the type, there's lots of different types of questions and the answers that are received from your form viewers will change depending on which type you select. I want multiple choice. I want folks to be able to choose from a list of possibilities, but I only want them to be able to choose one answer. So I'm going to say single select. They can only select a single multiple choice option. And that's because when I'm trying to find out the answer to a question, I think single select can be a bit more specific. So in this case, I'm wanting to find out, how valuable is my marketing strategy in terms of social media, and see if lots of folks are saying, oh, I heard about you through social media. So that's an example. I'm going to select multiple choice. So associated custom field is the next choice I have. And this is the important part. If I keep this blank as none, I'm just going to have the information that's entered into these questions stored on the form response, stored on the actual response itself. So I can come into here and I can check it if I want, but it won't update the custom fields that are stored on my contacts profiles. And the clues in the name, custom field. So if I wanted to, I could select from a couple of custom fields in here and choose something for it to be connected to. I actually don't have one created for this at the moment, so I might cancel and jump into organization settings, and you can watch me sort of figure that one out. So if I go to custom fields, you can see how I've got a bunch in my test account, and they're all kind of separated in these beautiful little sections. I'm very satisfied with the organization here. I wish my life was as organized as this. But most importantly, I have a section for mailing campaigns. So here's all of the information that I collect in my fake account that maybe you might want to start collecting. So it's things like communication preferences, campaign notes, stuff like that. We'll add a custom field. How did you hear about us? And again, I want to make sure that that type is multiple choice single select. Very important that the type of custom field you select here matches up with the type of question you're adding. And I'll show you in a little bit why. But multiple choice single select. I'll just chuck a couple in here. I think you might all have a big list of stuff that you have, but I just want to give you an example. So social media, flyer or newspaper maybe. And last one, let's go from a friend. So I'll save that and it's been added here, and I can always check the type by just viewing the type column, or make changes, delete it, or I can move it up and down by using these icons as well. So you too can be organized. I'll head back to forms, jump in, and let's re-add that question now that I've got it set up. Whoop. How did you hear about us? And then for the type, I'm making sure I'm selecting the correct type. And I'll show you what I meant by that. So let's say for type, even though I created a multiple choice single select custom field, if I select number and try to locate that custom field I just created, it's not going to appear in this list. In fact, the list of custom fields is going to automatically filter to only show those custom fields that match this type. If I change it to date and time, there's none. What about multiple choice multi-select? There's a bunch of different options. And at last, if I choose multiple choice single select, there's that option I just created. And the reason for this is just to help keep things easier for you when you're kind of selecting which custom field to use. So you saw me, I had, 50 custom fields. So if we didn't do that filtering, I'd have to scroll through all of the custom fields and find the right one. And I know folks with 300 custom fields, so the scrolling would just be a nightmare. Wherever possible, avoid the scroll. So that's just a way of filtering it and making it easier for you as well. So I created my custom field. I've connected it. So we've got an associated custom field here, and those answers response options that I chose before have automatically been pulled here. So we'll go ahead and we'll save it. And just a quick tip, if you're wanting to check to see if your question is connected to a custom field, just make sure something's populated in here. Okay, onwards and upwards. Let's take it even further. If I add a question here, I want to try something a little bit more detailed. I want to get really granular with the data that I'm collecting. So let's say I want to look at, let me just copy and paste it because it's quite long. What sort of communications would you like to receive? So some folks just have an opt-in, the ability to opt in, but if you really want to take it really far, take it further and deeper and make things really personalized in your email marketing, then adding a question like this can be really powerful. So it's multiple choice, multi-select for me because I want them to have different options, multiple choice, but I want them to be able to select as many options. Ideally, everyone's interested in everything at my organization, so maybe they'll select all of them. And then for this one, I've just got areas of interest is a custom field I've created in the background for that. So I've got things like newsletter, fundraising events, and annual reports, updates, events, and things like that. So when someone fills in this form, not only will their contact profile be added to Keela, their email subscription status will be set to opted in. They'll also have this on their profile, and I'll be able to filter contacts by the response they put in here. So maybe I've got 5 email marketing lists that I send out to regularly. My newsletter email marketing list is all contacts who've ticked this option when they were filling out the form, and it goes once a week. My events, galas, and special announcements down the bottom, I send out an email for that maybe once a quarter because that's when we hold events and I let people know about that stuff. So it's a really cool way of letting folks choose how they want to be contacted and having control over their relationship with your organization without you having to have that conversation. It's all automated through this form. Onwards and upwards. Okay, so I've got 2 questions. I'm feeling like this is going to be really good. I'm going to be collecting some really cool data here. Let's head to the designer. Now, before you start any kind of design work or customization on your form, I want you to think about how you're intending to share it. If you're like Single Friendly Church and North York Community House and you plan to embed the form snugly in your website, you actually won't have to do a lot of this design because when you're doing that, when you're embedding a form, only the form information is included. Just this section here, we try and keep it as small as possible so that you can fit it within your website. Of course, if you want to add stuff to your website information, you can do that just using your website tools. If you're wanting to be like Launch Space, if you've got a really detailed form, you can edit every other option. You can do what they did and put an introduction message in here. You can have images and things like that. It's up to you. In this scenario, I'm just wanting to embed this nice little neat subscription form box on my website. I don't want the rest, so I'm going to get rid of it. Let's hide the header, hide the body, hide the image, hide the body. Never thought I'd say that on a webinar. And hide the footer. Here we go. Perfect. So now it's nice and neat and compact, and you've saved yourself a lot of time with editing and customizing. And this is sort of how these questions are going to appear. So the how did you hear about us? It was just a single option. So people can only choose one option from this list. But the multi-choice option, people can tick multiple choice like that. That's kind of the difference between the two. Okay, so let's say I'm keeping it really simple. These options are perfect. The blue here matches the website that I've got, so I'm feeling good. It's time to publish. I head to settings, and before you can share your form, you do need to publish it. And then these sharing options become available. And I wanted to talk through them a little bit because we showed some best practices, so let's just teach you how to do each option. So the public link is the first one, and this is what LaunchSpace had used. So they've got a link here, a public link linked to this button here. And when I click on it, it opens up the form as a standalone web page. So they've just gotten that link and linked it to their button. And you can do that too, definitely. You can also copy and paste this link into social media. You can share it there. You can put it into eBlasts, hyperlink text and stuff in your emails as well. That's another option. But basically, if I copy this and paste it into my browser, it'll just open up the form standalone. So that's kind of how it looks. And so if I was going to do this, if this was how I was going to be sharing my form, maybe I would have kept the header and the image in there and made those look a little bit prettier. It's up to you. Next is QR code. This one is an unsung hero. I'm very excited to hear any stories anyone has about using this QR code because I think it's fantastic. So you can take this code and you can paste it into a poster, into a Word document. I don't know how people are making their flyers anymore, but folks can come up and they can scan it with their smartphones and fill in the form then and there and head off. This is a really cool way of getting folks to sign up to your newsletter off the online space. So definitely something to consider. And the same goes for donation forms, membership subscriptions. Maybe you have a big poster at an event you're holding and folks can come up and scan and they can make a donation just standing there in front of it. Very cool. And lastly, we have the embed options here. So this is the part that is going to put your form snugly in your website. You're going to copy this code here, just click on that button and it copies it automatically to your clipboard and send it through to whoever is going to be updating your website. And they just paste that code into the back end of your website and your form sits there. The best part I think about Keela forms, or there's lots of things, one of my favorite things, is that they're self-updating. So even if you put this URL or this QR code somewhere around, or if you embed this code in your website, even if you make changes to the form later on, it'll automatically update itself. So you just put the form, upload it somewhere once, and you can make changes in Keela and it'll just keep updating itself. You don't need to replace it every time, which I think is fantastic. If you have new things to add, maybe you've got new questions you want to ask, you can always come in to the setup tab here, add those new questions down here, and your form is going to keep itself updated. Really handy, especially if you're like me and you tend to come up with ideas on the fly. Okay, so one more thing I want to show you about Keela forms to get your kind of creative mind whirring is this auto tag button down here. So not only do you have the option of filtering contacts by the responses they give on your forms, you can also set it up so that anyone who completes a form is automatically put into a tag. So this is really handy for the folks who are keeping track and sorting their contacts with tags and those labels. So for example, maybe I want to click newsletter here. So anyone who completes this form is automatically going to have the newsletter tag applied to them. And I'll show you a really cool way of how that can kind of all connect. All right, let's do that now actually. So let's say I'm here, I'm very excited to be subscribing to the Papa Project's mailing list. I'll come in here and I'll pop some details. So let's say Elsie at Care Labs. I'm going to physically tick that opt-in option, very GDPR compliant. How did you hear about us? Social media. And then I'm interested in the newsletter, annual reports, and events. So if I click subscribe, let's head back to my contacts. And here you can see pretty much immediately a contact profile has been created for me, a brand new contact profile created on August 26th. My primary email address is updated, tags, all of that kind of stuff. And then here you can see beautiful green opted in, which is what we want to see. And more importantly, we've got the subscribe to form newsletter sign up. So I know, brilliant, they subscribed on August 26th. That's exactly when they physically opted in to receive marketing communications from me. And they used this form here. So I can kind of track that back. And if I go down to my custom fields, here's all of that information that I selected on here. So how does that work for you in terms of segmentation? What's the final step of the automation of this? Because you didn't have to do a thing in this scenario. You didn't have to create a contact profile. You didn't have to chase up email addresses, and all of those custom fields and tags were updated automatically. So let's say I have a segment that I want to send my newsletter e-blast to once a week, like I mentioned. So we'll call it newsletter because I'm very creative. And the filter for that there's two I could choose from. So maybe I want to do the custom field first. So I'll filter my contacts by custom fields. And the specific custom field that I want to use is communication preference. No, it's areas of interest. There we are, areas of interest. And then for that, you can also type to search in that function if you know. And then in that, I want to put newsletter. So this is going to filter out all of my contacts who have put newsletter in the custom field areas of interest. And I'll go ahead and I'll save that. And there I am. So it's automatically pulling this contact profile because there is a field on the profile that matches that information. And I could just leave this here. I could come back in 1 week, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and it would automatically update itself. So anytime someone is going to be filling in that form and choosing newsletter, they're going to be added to this list. So I don't even need to check it. I can just send out my e-blast once a week or whenever to the same list over and over, knowing that folks will be removed if they're unsubscribed, or are removed from the list if they're unsubscribed, or if they're added to the list if they tick newsletter as an option. Another way that I could do it is with that tag, that auto tag that I put on it, right? Which works in a very similar way. So I could search by tags, contains any of, and I'll just look for newsletter. And it should be the same. Oh, we've got some more, some older folks who have been in my account for a while who have that newsletter tag. So this is a really cool way of introducing a new process. If you've never done anything like this on your Keela account before, and you don't want to sort of start with nobody, right? So maybe you've got a newsletter tag that you've been using. Use the auto tag option then to make sure that new folks are added automatically. So then you're sort of combining your old marketing list and the new subscription form process. So I hope that makes sense. And again, because the auto tag is happening automatically, everyone's going to be given that tag and then added to this list as soon as they match those filters. So that's kind of ticking along in the background. Okay, I'm sure you're all in love with forms as much as I am now. I'm very jazzed about them. But now I think I want to talk a little bit about why you should use Keela forms, because you might have lots of folks who are using forms that aren't Keela. And here's a couple of 3 different points of why you might consider using a Keela one. So a caveat here is that not everyone can use a Keela form. I know that there's lots of folks out there whose organizations have to use their own specific form, particularly I think religious organizations are a good example where they have their whole chapter has one form and all the little divisions, you have to use that form. So it's not for everyone, we definitely understand that. But if you can, here's maybe why you would consider it. All right, save time. Number 1, this should be the biggest reason. You should already be convinced if you can. So I think folks, the biggest preventer of people replacing their forms with Keela forms is time. So yes, it does take about an hour. You've got to create the form and then you've got to get someone, or maybe you do this part, to replace it on your website. You need someone who has access to your website. But I know that is a bit of time and you're all very time pressed. But if you think about the time it's going to save you in the long run by completely automating all those processes, I think you'll agree that it's definitely worth it. And because it's only about an hour, you might be able to get someone to help you with that web development, or you can reach out to us. We might be able to help you out with it as well. So here's what you're saving time on. All of these processes are happening automatically. New contacts are getting added to your Keela account, whether they're making donations, whether they're filling in event registration forms or volunteer sign-up forms or subscribing. Their profiles are automatically going to be added to Keela, which means you don't have to manually add them and you don't have to import them from another system. It all happens automatically. You're collecting and payments and issuing receipts. So if you are in Canada or the US, you've got the CRA and the IRS as being governing bodies, or if you're in Australia, it's the ATO, or no matter what, wherever governing body you have, the best practice they recommend is issuing receipts immediately after a payment has been made or a donation has been made. And Keela does that. So you can collect a payment and issue a receipt without having to do anything. And then at the end of the year, when it comes to receipting time, all of that is already done. So what could be a very stressful time becomes something that has automatically been processed earlier in the year. And then there's just the last things that we talked about just before about adding tags and filtering contacts, updating marketing lists, all of that automatic data collection and organizing of your contacts, which I think is really useful. All right, next one. This is the one that normally makes people perk up their ears, but it comes with a caveat. So potentially you could save money because we use PayPal and Stripe as our payment processors. So if you're using a donation form or a revenue form, this is something to consider. PayPal and Stripe have some of the lowest non-profit discounts for payment processing I've ever seen. I've got them down the bottom here. PayPal actually just changed their nonprofit discount fee to 1.99%, which is definitely the lowest I've ever seen. So it's lower than people like Canada Helps or what's another one? Maybe Donor Box, I think, is another one. The caveat is I don't know every single payment processor in existence. So you might be like, Elsie, you know what? It's not lower than the one I have, and perhaps I've never heard of it. But of the ones I have heard, 1.99% is the lowest I've seen. So maybe just check with your payment processor, see what discount payment processing fee you're paying. And if this is lower, you might be saving money there. Keela doesn't charge a fee for any of the payment processing that happens. It's only what goes to PayPal and Stripe. The forms and all of that are just included in your subscription. So it's just that payment processing fee that you're going to be charged. We also have the option for payment processing fee coverage. Now, this one, lots of people do have this, but not everyone. So you have the option of folks who are making payments towards your organization choosing to cover the donation fee, which can be awesome. Lots of people do. I know I do. You kind of can't not, you know what I mean? When I see that option, I'm like, I've got to do that. So it's definitely worth considering. Better segmentation. Now, this is the one that people aren't that excited about, but you should be. It's the biggest part of managing a CRM, of managing an account like Keela. So in all of our best practice webinars that we hold about email marketing and all of the, and creating e-blasts and having a digital marketing campaign, one of the most important tips that we talk about is segmentation. And that means splitting your contacts up into different segments based on their profile data. And it gives you this really cool power to be able to create more personalized reach outs while still making them mass emails, because we don't have time to be sending beautiful one-on-one emails. But if you can segment your lists even just a little bit, the difference is miraculous, and it's definitely a best practice that's encouraged in the organization. So for an example, I recently made a donation to an organization, and they were a US-based one. And even though I'm in Canada, they still were able to recognize that and filter me out as being someone from Canada. And the follow-up email that they sent was Canadian specific. I thought that was fantastic. So that's another example of how you can use segmentation. And when folks come to me and they say, okay, so I'm using MailChimp, or I'm using Constant Contact, I'm not super sold on it. Why would I consider moving to Keela? Give me the number one reason. And I think this is it. This is the number one reason. If you're not 100% sold on MailChimp or your other email marketing tool, the ability to create specific mailing lists in Keela, to connect them to your forms, to use donation data to create those mailing lists, and have unlimited custom fields and all of your interactions automatically logged is definitely the biggest reason. Of course, you can have communication preferences tracked in MailChimp, for example, but you can't have the donation data in there. So if you wanted to send, a marketing campaign to all folks who donated in this month, who wanted to hear about my events, but also they filled out my registration form, you could create that marketing list using Keela's segmentation tools. So that's the final kind of piece. I know not everyone, it's not as jazzy as saving time or money, but it's a really cool way to leverage your own data, maybe in a way you hadn't considered before. Okay, lots of talking on my behalf, and I can see we've got lots of questions. I've been seeing them popping up, which I'm really excited about. Let's fire away. Okay, I've got Q&A. Here we go. Let's start. Yana, this may be obvious, but how do you copy the QR code to use it later? It doesn't work like a single image that I can click right and copy and paste. That's a great question. Let me demonstrate that. And it's not an obvious answer, to be honest. I've only done it once, so let's make sure I can do it. Oh, so you right click on it and then copy image, or I think what might be easier is saving image. So if you save it, then you can insert it. I know with copying you definitely can do, but I always tend to save it, especially if you're not sure where you're going to be using it straight away. And then that way you don't have to log into Keela every time. Oh, and Maggie said you can also drag it to your desktop or screenshot it as well, because it's just a live image. There's nothing special in it. Yeah, cool, brilliant. Answer live, done. Tim, how do you change the banner color where it says subscription information separately from the button color? Let me take a look. I want to make sure that it's actually possible. So when you go to a form and you've got style settings here, these are the different colors that you can choose. So you've got background color, button and title color. Sorry, maybe you can't. At the moment, the button and the title background color are connected. So this header here, which I think is what you mean, is connected to this coloring. But if you're wanting to have an extra color in there, what you could do is insert the header. Let's display the header, but I'm going to remove the logo, the name, and the tagline. I'm going to remove the image, and maybe I'm going to make it, what goes with purple? Yellow? Did I imagine that? Let's try that and save. And then that's something you could do there. So you could have that header up there with a different color, and you can also change the height of it. So maybe I'll make it 150. So that's the option there. But at the moment, like I said, this part here and the button are tied together. But we're always looking for ways that you want to format your form even further. So that's a really good suggestion to put into our product portal if it's not already there. Seems like it might be something that's already there. I do know that there's some like formatting and customization stuff there, but it couldn't hurt to pop it in. All right, answer live, done. Another one from Tim. How did you make text fields like first name more narrow without shrinking the whole form? I think what you mean is that you want this here to be only this wide, which is impossible. The fields will stretch to the extent of the form. And just because we want people to be able to put really long stuff in there if they need. Lots of people have really long names and we can't really predict when and when not it's going to be. So all fields will stretch to the extent of the form. But again, product portal, maybe the UX team can figure a way around that or put in an extra setting. They can, that's their job. That's what we pay them for, is to find solutions I can't think of. So definitely pop that into the product portal. All right, next question. The answers we get back from our forms will automatically update the contact info if we use the associated custom field. Exactly. So if you have, so it works in two ways. The fields here will be updated. So all of your regular contact fields. And then as long as you have a custom field in here, that custom field on their profile will be automatically updated. Now, it depends on the logic though. There is a little star note here, but I'll show you what I mean. You can actually choose the logic. So here we've got form field replacement logic. So you can choose to only update empty fields if you want, which I think some folks choose. We have it as the default option because it can be the safest option. In case someone accidentally, you've got a phone number and someone accidentally puts their wrong, type something wrong, you might only want empty fields to be updated. So this is a good option if you're wanting to get to collect new information that you've never collected before. Alternatively, you can have always replace. So if you think you might have out-of-date data, you can send this form out with always replace, and no matter what they put in there, if we can match their information up with an existing profile in Keela, their data will automatically be updated. Of course, if it's a new contact that has never existed in your account before, their whole profile will be updated with whatever information they put in here. And the last one is always create a new contact. So this is a good one for folks who know that they might have out-of-date data, but they're not 100% sure. So you might want folks to create a new profile, even if their data matches an existing one, and then later on you'll go and you'll merge them once you sort of have a chat to them about what's old and what's new. So those are the options. But to answer your question, yes, custom fields will be updated automatically. All right, next one. We're using a Keela form for our annual meeting registration. Oh, it's from David, by the way, but couldn't figure out a way to add an optional donation. So we are using a membership form type, which isn't the best fit. Could we do what we want with one of the other form types? I see, because for a donation form, you need to make a payment when you're filling it in. I've never considered that before. So it's a tick to be an optional donation. It's not possible at the moment. So for donation forms, it's all or nothing. You've got to make the donation or not. I know it's something that may be possible, like a little tick box, right? I can envision it. So I'm thinking if you haven't put it in the product portal, put it in there already. And my suggested workaround would be for them to create it as a custom field so that they could tick it to say, yes, I would like to make an optional donation. And then you could filter out anybody who's ticked yes and send them a separate donation form. So not ideal in that situation. I'd like it to be automated, but yeah, not something I'd thought about. So pop it in the product portal and we'll see if we can get that going. If you have Keela's automation tool, and you could set it up so that anyone who ticked that box would automatically be sent a donation form if you're expecting a lot of people. But since it's an annual meeting registration, my thought is that you'll probably send out the registration all at once, and then people will fill it in and they would say, yes, I want to make the donation. So maybe you could send an e-blast follow-up to everyone who sent yes. So you wouldn't have to tick all in one. That would be another recommendation. Ooh, okay, it's live. Lots of talking. I'm just going to take a sip of water while I read the next question. All right, next question is from Larry. When a client unsubscribes, what changes actually occur to my data? Great question, and I'll show you this live. So let's say I'm in here and I unsubscribe. I'll put them as opted out. Here's what you'll see. So this a similar thing from if they do this from an e-blast that you've sent them or from a marketing material that you've sent. So their email subscription status will be changed to opted out, and we'll also track that. So status manually updated to opted out by Elsie Coffee. So that's me. So you'll see exactly when and how they unsubscribed on their contact profile too. So that's really handy because, you know, you might be like, our most important donor unsubscribed. What is going on? And then you can see, oh, Elsie unsubscribed them manually. I'll go and talk to Elsie. It's just really important to keep track of that to be really compliant as well. So I think, I can't remember exactly what it says, but I believe it says something along the lines of unsubscribed from eBlast or something like that for when you're unsubscribing there.